Welcome, y'all. It's 12:01, so we'll go ahead and get started today. My name is Kara Hamilton. I'm chair of the Professional Development Committee of YLS, and we've put together a session today, a Learning with Leaders session on how to assist aging family members. We first of all want to take a minute to thank United Community Bank, our sponsor. They do a lot here in the community, especially with United Way. So thank them so much for that. We're so appreciative to have the relationship with them. We'll jump right into things today. Patrick Cobb of AARP has graciously agreed to be our moderator. So I'm going to let him kick things off today. And I think each of our panelists are going to do a short introduction for themselves. So thank y'all for being with us today, and we're very excited.
Patrick, are you on mute?
Sorry about that. No, I need a t-shirt that says, "Are you on mute?" I think we've all learned that we're doing the right thing. I'm Patrick Cobb with AARP South Carolina, and I'm in Columbia. And I've been with AARP a little over 20 years. And so my role with AARP is I'm the Associate State Director for Advocacy and Campaign. So I get to do a lot of fun things. But right now, I'm working in our national office remotely, working with 9 states and with their campaigns until the end of the year in an interim position, sitting in for someone who's maternity leave. So it's been kind of an adventure for me. Anytime that we talk about caregiving and aging parents is always a great topic, especially for folks like me. I'm the tail end of the baby boom, and I have aging parents who are both 81. They still live in the same house that I grew up in high school across the river here. I have a mother-in-law who's 95 who lives independently in a retirement village community in Florida, who is spunky as 21. And so as we've seen the progression of aging and how caregiving affects families, especially during the pandemic, and how the effects and tolls that it's taken on a lot of people in a lot of different faces and places across our state. This is going to be a great conversation with the folks that the panel, the Kara's lined up and the YLS, and want to thank them for bringing this to your attention, because I think you'll learn a lot of information. There's a lot of, when you're talking caregiving, it's more than just, checking on mom, making sure she has food or she can get to her appointments. There's a lot of legal, there's a lot of financial, there's a little bit of everything. And for families who aren't planning on these kind of issues, it can be tough and, it can be heartbreaking at times. So I want to first call on our panel. We'll start with our questions. I'm going to go first to Lisa Brown, who's here in Columbia, I believe. Lisa, introduce yourself a minute for us.
Sure. My name is Lisa Hostetler Brown. I am an attorney with Lawyer Lisa. I started Lawyer Lisa about 8 years ago after working at another large firm in town for about 7 years. And we focus our practice on estate planning, elder law, and something called life care planning. So we help older individuals, obviously people on the younger side as well. If you're in your 50s, you're still young in our practice. But we help people kind of plan for the future. We work with financial advisors, CPAs, the other professionals that our clients have to make sure that they have a comprehensive plan for moving forward, for aging in place if that's what they want, or whatever their situation is, based on their family and their finances. We kind of help them achieve whatever their goal is.
Well, let me go with our first question for you, Lisa, and kind of more from a legal standpoint. What is one thing that children or family members can do to best plan for their aging parents? A very simple question, but very complicated, I'm sure, when it comes to the answer.
Yeah, so I would say that planning before your parent loses capacity or is having problems, or you're needing this stuff, is one way to leave all the doors open. So if you want to have options later on down the road, convince them that they need to come see someone like us, another elder law attorney in their state. Your parents may not live here in South Carolina, but find an elder law attorney who can do this planning for them now, get them the right documents, set their stuff up, help them make important decisions now, so that when they do start to decline, there's a plan in place all the options are available to them. And I'm sure when you talk with, William or Beth, they're going to tell you the same thing. It's that if you have plans, that if you do have these options available down the road, then we can do stuff. And one easy example of that is I have a lot of children come in to see me after their parents have declined, and they bring me a financial durable power of attorney that their parent executed 20 years ago. A lot of times when I'm reviewing that particular document, it does not have the powers in it that I need to be able to do some of the creative and complex planning that we like to do from an elder law standpoint. So there's things I can do to get people qualified for different benefits, to protect assets, to avoid probate, that I'm really limited on because they didn't have a good planning in advance with an attorney who practices in this area of law. So, getting your real estate closing attorney to throw a will together for you is great when you're in your 20s and 30s. But as you get older, when you're in your 50s and 60s and 70s, you need to have somebody who's doing the right kind of planning for you so that down the road that we have all these options available to us.
Sure. Let me ask a follow-up question with that as well, too. When you talk about power of attorney, medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, how often should families update those records?
Well, first of all, I think it depends on what you got to start with. So if you saw somebody like me and you got a good comprehensive plan, and there's a lot of good lawyers that practice in this area that can get you your whole kind of comprehensive plan to start, at that point, we normally tell our clients that they need to update when they have life changes. A good example of life change would be your kids who you used to have guardians set out for are now old enough and responsible enough to be able to be your agent under these documents. That would be considered a life update or a life change. Your child marries somebody that you hate and you want to make sure that the stuff is protected for when they get their inevitable divorce. That's a life situation. You're nearing retirement. Anyone who's thinking about retirement, those are great people to come and see us because we can plan, because you're no longer going to be on that growing side of things. You're going to be on the preserve and maintain side of things. So we say life changes. I think kind of the standard rule is, a lot of attorneys say 3 to 5 years, but I'd say our documents maybe last a little bit longer than that because we have the plan in place.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to now go to William Velasco, who is a financial planner here as well. So William, welcome.
Hey, thank you. My name is William Velasco. I'm a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. I've been with Merrill for about 8 years now. So actually, lawyer Lisa actually did my dad's estate planning. So I've been firsthand and seen her do her work. So I work with small families and privately owned businesses and stuff like that. And our team here at Merrill Lynch at TCG, we go through about 12 to 13 estates a year. So this is something that is very close. I'm actually working on one right now. And it is a huge difference between people who have gone and seen their CPAs and estate attorneys and worked with us on accepting that they will pass at some point and that they are aging. And there is a certain time, especially with Alzheimer's, that people aren't going to be cognitive and be able to do things at these later stages of life when they finally accept that they are getting older, that they need to do this as soon as possible.
Yeah, so let me ask you, one of the questions I'm curious about, and you sent it to me earlier, was that most of your advice is tailored around specific families. And so how can you explain to folks, especially in the young leaders group here, who have aging parents, that it's not a cookie cutter size approach when it comes to financial planning for preparing for retirement, not retirement, but for caregiving for their parents?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, that's a whole thing of when you read some of these books and some things online and it's just a one-liner and one paragraph about, hey, you should do this, just because it's saying, hey, you should put all of your assets in a trust. Well, it might be that your aging parents, all of their money that they have for retirement is in IRAs. Well, if you put an IRA into a trust, it just makes it extremely more complicated whenever that parent passes away, and it really doesn't give you the advantages now with some of the new changes in the laws that it used to give you. And so just because but now if your family had $10 million or $20 million in after tax money, then yeah, it would definitely be worth putting that money into a trust to be able to safeguard it from any lawsuits or anything that might pop up. So there's different things for different people and the different ways that everything's set up.
Great. Thanks so much for that answer. And I'm going to now we're going over to Beth Lingard at Lexington Medical Center. Beth, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Thank y'all so
Great.
much for having me this morning.
Tell us a little bit about your little background about what you do over at the hospital.
Sure. Well, I have the distinct pleasure of being a senior major gift officer with Lexington Medical Center's Foundation. So we're the a nonprofit extension of the hospital that provides support for different patient care and community care programs. And I get to work with amazing donors that just have such big hearts and care for people that they may never meet, that they want to help through some of life's more difficult moments. And so I work with them to develop plans as they're thinking about how they want to realize their philanthropy and take the assets that they've accumulated and distribute them to do really good work in our community, and helping them to think through what are some of the smarter ways to go about making those gifts. And so that is an important part of my work. I also recently publicly announced that I have taken on a position as well with Thompson Associates. So I'm a vice president with a firm out of Brentwood, Tennessee. So I provide consulting services to nonprofit supporters to help them with charitable estate planning. So it's a nice complement to what I'm already doing with the hospital foundation and getting to serve donors in a different way through that work as well.
Wonderful. Let me ask you this question, though. So what are some of the ways that parents or family members can establish a charitable legacy, and how could they do that? What would be the purpose of that?
So as we were listening to Lisa and William talk about the importance of planning, I would emphasize that and doing that planning sooner than later, and really looking at planning as an opportunity to develop a vision and dream for how you can take the assets that you've worked so hard to build during your lifetime. We're all doing that. We're going in, we're clocking in every day, and we're giving our gifts and our talents to a passion, and that results in financial stability and the ability to accumulate and build wealth during our lifetime. Our parents are no exception to that. They worked very hard to take care of family and to build a life. And when they pass, they're going to have assets. We all will have wealth. We might not think of ourselves as wealthy, but in the eyes of our world, we are. We will pass with assets that will be distributed one way or another. And they'll go to heirs, and a portion will theoretically go to our federal government. And when you look at your assets, you have an opportunity there because you have something called social capital. And so the portion of your assets that would be actually dedicated to tax when we pass, either income tax or state tax, that portion can be preserved to do charitable good. That is your social capital. So you can actually plan around how to make sure that the majority of that goes to nonprofits and charities that you support. It's going to go for social good if it either goes through the federal government and its programs or through the charities that we all know and trust and love, like United Way of the Midlands, that are doing great work here in our community. And so I think most of us would say we prefer to do that. So think about the fact that your parents are going to have a similar heart to give, and they have a lot of opportunities to do that. They can do that through a bequest to a nonprofit or a church that they support, oftentimes multiple organizations. That's done when they sit down with their attorney, when they sit down with Lisa and they formulate their will or their trust. They can make a special provision in that document to give to a nonprofit organization, either a specific dollar amount. They can give a percentage of their assets or their residual of their estate after all their bequests and obligations have been taken care of. And that's a pretty simple way to go about it. If they've already created their will and their will is in good shape, it's benefiting those that they want to, and they don't really need to make specific changes to the will, they can do something called a codicil. A codicil is a really simple document. They name the organization, its legal name, its tax ID, and the specific type of gift that they'd like to give. And it's very important that that document is placed with their original will. So it's added to the original will document and would go into their safe deposit box or wherever they're keeping that document, so that that can be honored by their personal representative at the time that needs to be carried out. Another interesting way that donors give is through making beneficiary designations. And so that's another really simple way. It doesn't cost them anything. They could go by and see William and say, hey, William, I'd like to dedicate part of my IRA or my brokerage account to go to this nonprofit organization that I love, that I volunteered at for 20 years. And they just make a request and they follow the procedures to update that document, and they can include charity and to receive a portion or all of that asset. And it's a very simple way to make that gift. And something to think about that you would want to consult with your estate advisor on, either your financial advisor, your estate attorney on, is you're making those kinds of decisions, what you'd like to give to your heirs, what you'd like to give to charity. You want to think about the best path to do that in the most tax efficient way. And when we transfer IRA assets, those assets, tax has to be paid on those assets eventually. So even as heirs start to take that money out and withdraw money from an IRA, they're going to pay income tax on that at that time. And oftentimes, heirs don't necessarily like to do it over time. They may actually want to take that money out immediately, and then it increases their tax bracket, and it can be a substantial amount of tax that's paid if they go ahead and use those assets. So there can be ways to plan around that that continue to give income to an heir over time, even over their life from that IRA, and effectively can give more to them. And then also do good for charity. So those are things to think about and talk with and discuss with your advisors, and that your parents could take advantage of. Some other ways to give would include a life estate. So say they have a secondary property, a beach house, but my husband and I, maybe we got a beach house from his parents, and so we don't need another one. But my parents might want to continue to enjoy the use and fun of having that beach house and having those memories during their lifetime. So they could establish a life estate, which would allow them to go ahead and deed the property for its remainder interest over to a nonprofit organization. And they get a tax deduction in the year that they make that gift, but they get to continue using that for their lifetime. And then when they pass, the charity then receives that property, and it's then sold by the charity, and it goes to do great work inside that organization. So it's another way that they can have a benefit to save on some taxes and continue to use that property. Many of us may have parents that are involved in that have a family business. Maybe they started a business back in the late 70s in their garage, and that company has grown and grown. Maybe you're working in that business now with them, and it's a family business that's thriving and making millions of dollars, and that's a wonderful blessing for a family. Your parents worked very hard to build that. They're probably going to want to retire, or they're getting close to that. The business interest that they own could actually be translated into a charitable gift. So there are paths where you can actually benefit a charity with that business interest through the actual plan of succession and the buyout of that ownership interest. There are some caveats and some landmines in that process. So it's super, super important. I couldn't stress enough how important it is that your parents would go and talk with an advisor before they even make beginning steps, and before they even put the first email together considering an intent to sell that business interest. But that's a way that they can help to do some really great work for a nonprofit and avoid sometimes quite large capital gains for the growth of that business over time. So they can hold on to that portion that would otherwise go out to capital gains when they sold that business interest, that money can continue to be invested and grow and pay income back to your parents. It can pay income back to other generations. And then the remainder of that can go to charity at the end of the day. So there's some very unique ways that your parents can take the wealth they've accumulated and give back to charity and still do some great work for your family. There are other kinds of gifts that provide income. So a gift annuity is one way that your parents can take an asset that maybe isn't making very much return, maybe a CD or something that has a low interest rate on it. I mean, if they don't really need that asset, if they're comfortable enough financially that they don't need to rely on that asset for a future need, they can actually give that asset to a nonprofit, and the nonprofit creates a little contract with them, and they agree to pay an income to your parents for life. Or to other beneficiaries, and that gives them an immediate charitable deduction. So it's a great thing that a lot of times parents will do, and they may ladder it. They may give, say, $10,000 this year, and then they give $10,000 next year, and $10,000 the following year, and they get an income stream off of that that's oftentimes improved from the return they're getting in the market. Now, I will tell you again, this is not financial, legal, or tax advice. To talk to your advisors about these things, but there are great trusts as well, charitable remainder trusts and charitable lead trusts that also can help accomplish those goals and take assets that have grown and appreciated over time and turn them into income for your parents in their retirement and aging years, and that income can go to help support them. And sometimes, children want to know, well, if they give it to charity, if they put it in a trust, it's not going to come to me. That's not so great. I don't know how I feel about that. Well, actually, if you really run the illustrations for those gifts, oftentimes more comes to the children in the long run. And it can go to benefit successive generations. So maybe it can benefit you and also benefit your children someday through that trust. So there are neat ways that advisors can work together to create those structures to help benefit not only your parents, but your generation and other generations. And so there can be great benefits for doing a lot of good.
Thanks, Beth. That's some great information there. I want to go back now to William and Lisa and talk about some of the issues that families could possibly have. And I don't know if I mentioned this number or not, but there are over 800,000 unpaid family caregivers in this state. So a lot of folks are volunteering their time and helping family members as they do that. And women are 3 times more likely to retire so they can become caregivers. And so this is why having an open conversation about financial planning is important. William, let's talk a little bit about some of those issues that you've seen possibly when it comes to these kind of issues of family financial planning and for caregivers.
Yeah, one of the big ones is that we have having people retiring and taking time off of work, which means that if anybody knows, the 8th wonder of the world is compounding interest. So if you're continuing to dollar cost average into a 401k or a retirement plan, taking the time off between what seems to be like 35 to 45 for a lot of people to help take care of their parents and raise children at the same time, which is, this generation, the end of the baby boomers, it's happening a lot of taking care of parents and raising children, spending your money taking care of your parents and then spending money on children. You're not saving as much. And then all of a sudden they turn around at age 55, 60 and realize that Social Security, when it first came out, was supposed to take up about 80% of what you're going to spend in retirement. It is now only about 30%. So, and then pensions have gone by the wayside. There's very, very few companies that even offer pensions anymore. So it is solely based on each individual to plan for their own retirement and save for that retirement. And if your high income years are, and the years 20 or 30 years before you retire, you're not saving that money and you're not allowing the market, which means the past 2 years, the market's been up over 10%, even with COVID. So if you're not in the market, you're not inside of that and saving inside of that market, you could turn around and be 30, 40% behind where you would have been And that's, I mean, you know, obviously we have to take care of our elderly and stuff like that, but making sure that you're doing the financial planning that, hey, if you're not saving into a 401k, maybe you're saving into an IRA, or you're saving into a Roth IRA, or you're doing something and you have a plan of what we can build is, hey, what would it look like if I took 2 years off to take care of my parents and raise kids? What would that be if we had to spend at a nursing home or spend in childcare? And that's really the big thing. And then it's also, hey, how do we put, and Lisa can talk about this a lot better than I can, of power of attorneys and transfer on death and stuff to avoid probate, and having the conversations around the family members to make sure that there isn't a, well, I took in mom and dad, so you should pay me for this. Strict discussions between the children after the fact.
Yeah, great advice there. I mean, I think one of the things, and I want to go to Lisa with this next question, is like, you know, I'll have the conversation with my parents, and I feel like sometimes I should be a dentist because I'm pulling teeth to get the answers. And I ask the question and I get like, well, yeah. But then all of a sudden the conversation shifts to what they did yesterday. And I'm thinking, no, that's not what we're talking about. So when they start that shifting the conversation, I get a little leery of what's going on, and like, well, you know, well, tell me about that doctor's appointment that you went to, and why did you have to go to that doctor's appointment? You know, we're just fine, needed to get, you know, those kind of things. So Lisa, help us out with how do you ask these hard questions of mom and dad, because you're starting to pry into their personal information. And, you know, and here folks, South Carolina, Southerner type people, we don't like to talk about things in public. We talk about them in private behind the doors. So how do you help do those kind of things?
You know, that's a really good question. I have a lot of my clients run the gamut. You know, some come in with their kids or all their kids, you know, everyone's Skyping in to watch and see what's going to happen and know what's going on. And all people say, you know, all my kids have all my documents, or, you know, I made sure my daughter knows where to find everything and she has the copies of everything. And then I have some that say, I want this to be private until I die. And it may or may not be, depending on if they decline before they die or they just pass away. So, you know, it really does run the gamut. And, you know, for the people who are having a hard time getting their parents to get their stuff done or get their stuff in order, I always tell them, I say, if you can get them to our office and complete the questionnaire that we ask for that kind of talks about some family information and some financial information, you know, the odds of us being able to talk them through what they have now, because even if you don't have a single document, you have what's going to happen with no documents. If you have old documents, we can talk you through what's going to happen with those old documents. And then we can talk to you about, here's the alternative. Here's the plan you could have. Here's the options you could have. We can open some of those doors for you later on if this happens or this happens, if you do some updates. And more than 9 out of 10 times, they're going to look at what they have now and go, that's not what I want. I do want to have these options down the road, and they are going to make those changes. And, you know, sometimes they don't want to share that information, and that's fine. Like, we can build that into the plan. And a lot of times the plan is, give your kid this 1-page, you know, info sheet that we create for you. And you tell them, if you get sick or you need something, here's what they need to do. And it includes, you know, where the original documents are so they can access those, how to get in touch with their advisors. You know, if William's their financial advisor and the kids don't even know that, we're going to make sure that his information's on that sheet so that they're not, you know, off making decisions without consulting with this team who has put a plan together. You know, it's going to have our information. What if you lost your documents? You know, I've got a full set of those documents as well. And I can talk the kids through, okay, mom's declined. Here's what to do next. Here's the options for you. So, you know, we have a plan in place no matter how much or how little somebody wants to talk about stuff, and whether they want their kids involved or not. If you can just get them in the door to somebody you know can competently do this for them, and depending on where they are, you know, one good resource where you can look and find elder law attorneys is NELF.org, NELF.org. It's the National Elder Law Foundation. You can find an elder law attorney in whatever city and state your parents live in, it's a good resource. And you know that when you're sending them there, that this is an accredited, that test is one of the harder than a bar exam, I would say, test to take. In this area, it'll show that competency and the experience. So they're going to somebody that knows how to deal with whatever they have going on.
Great information. Thanks, Lisa. So I want to also introduce Andrew Boozer. Andrew, are you there?
Hey, Patrick, I'm here. How are you doing?
Hey, how are you? Sorry, I didn't mean to forget you there. Tell us a little bit about yourself there.
Oh, you're good. I'm Andrew Boozer. I'm the executive director at Senior Resources in Columbia. So we do Meals on Wheels and other need-based senior services all around Richland County and Columbia, and then work with our partners in Lexington County, Newberry, and Fairfield as well.
Y'all do some fabulous, fantastic work and such a great community resource here in the Midlands, and applaud you guys for what you do. And I know you're always looking for Meals on Wheels drivers, or I don't know if home delivered meal drivers, because I know Meals on Wheels is a copyrighted name. You can't have to use that correctly. But how has the pandemic affected, caregiving from your perspective? When you look at the number of, I'm sure your caseload has increased dramatically with people not wanting to get out. With caregivers, trying to figure out what's the best for mom and dad or a family member. How's it affected y'all?
Well, yeah, it's definitely been a roller coaster over the last 2 years for everybody, but particularly for seniors and for the caregivers of seniors. And so we're serving an elevated number of seniors right now, about 30% more than what we saw pre-pandemic. And so we're still able to respond to that need. It takes a lot of community support. You mentioned volunteers. It takes donations. It takes funding. It takes suppliers, which we don't take for granted right now, for food and storage containers and all of those things. And so we're really just powering through and making sure we're here for seniors in the community. It's really a different demographic oftentimes that reaches out to us than estate planning and getting things in order. It's often the phone call we get is from a child of an aging parent who may live across the country, and there's nobody here to take care of mom or dad or Aunt Sally or whoever it is. And it's a helpless feeling, not only for the senior to be isolated and to not have somebody there to check in on them, to help them have some meals or just be a resource. It's also helpless for the caregiver, for the next of kin who wants to be there, who wishes they could be there, but because of life circumstances, that's just not the way it works. And that's the gap that we fill in the senior planning network and helping, us take care of our parents and ones that we love as they age. Places like Senior Resources are out there and available. And so if anybody on this call right now, maybe you're in the opposite situation, you're here in Columbia, but you've got parents that are living elsewhere in the country. If you look for the local Council on Aging or Area Agency on Aging, usually those two terms, if you Google that in a geographic location, you'll find a place like Senior Resources that can help out.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. And I know another resource here in South Carolina, I know that we were proud of ARP, we were proud to work on a couple of years ago, was the Getcaresc.com website. And I think I got it right. I think it's a .com. I don't have it in front of me.
It is.
It's a one-door entryway for finding services in all 46 counties in South Carolina. It's managed by the the Department on Aging. Used to be the Lieutenant Governor's Office on Aging. It's managed by the Department on Aging, and they update it constantly. They meet with the providers, they vet the providers, they go through and make sure that the information is correct. It's a great resource, especially, as you say, for folks who have a parent who lives here in South Carolina, but they live in Missouri or Massachusetts or Florida, and they're trying to find those, the yellow pages don't exist anymore, and Google is our new yellow pages, but, directing the traffic to those websites, you can find all kinds of things from transportation to food, shelter, and how to do some of these issues of caregiving. So it's a great resource out there. And I think, a good resource to have as we have. So I don't know, Andrew, if you've got anything else to add to that or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Getcaresc.com. I would encourage everybody to get familiar with that. I've walked my parents through that website as well, because it's a great link to nonprofits and to government resources, but also for home care and folks that can come into a home and make a home safe and livable for a senior. Long-term care facilities, when the time comes to look at moving out of a home and into an assisted living facility or something like that. Tremendous resource, and I highly recommend that for anyone who's dealing with this with their parents, or maybe it's a neighbor or a neighbor who's dealing with parents. Getcaresc.com is a great place to start.
Yeah. Thanks for all you guys do over at Senior Resource. Y'all are a great asset to our community, and we really appreciate it. And especially all your volunteers who are going the extra mile delivering those meals to seniors these days. So kudos and hats off to the Senior Resources there. I want to go back to Lisa. Lisa, let's talk about some of the biggest mistakes you see families make when it comes to elder law and what they're doing, not particularly wrong, but what they could do better. And I always like to find the solution more than the issue. So I guess, how do we make it correct as opposed to, you made an error?
Well, that's part of it, is if we can identify it early, we can fix it. So there is no problem, right? But I would say that the biggest thing is not reviewing this stuff and making sure that there's a plan in advance. And I know we kind of talked about that early on, but I really think, and I'm sure William's would agree with me on this, but clients that have a plan, and I always talk to people, I go, you could go on, insert online document creation, or insert, wealth manager who doesn't ever talk to you or look at your stuff, and you have something, right? But if you don't have a plan that goes along with that and what's going to happen, then you're just kind of, the ship in the middle of the night with no navigation. I mean, anything could happen. And so looking at this stuff early is important. I always tell people, they say, oh, mom's got a will. I say, well, have you seen it? No. Do you know where it is? No. Mom doesn't have a will. You're not going to find the will. And that's a common misconception. This is part of, coming and speaking with a professional, is that people think you should have a will. But most people don't realize that a will equals going to court. And any asset that's going to pass through your will is going through the court process. And that's one of the things that personally I try and avoid for my clients. If I can set your stuff up, I work with your financial advisor. So I'd say, here, William, here's the list of how we want to retitle assets and how we want the beneficiary designations to go. If they're making donations and working with Beth, we're going to make sure that that stuff is going to go where you're intending it to go in the simplest way possible, without delay, without extra expense, without probate, without, no offense, probate lawyer and the extra costs associated with that. Make things go as easy as possible. It makes it easier on the children, easier on the family. The person who does the planning doesn't necessarily have the benefit of it because they're deceased at that time, but their children and their family who don't have to go through any of those processes are the ones that benefit. So, kind of avoid, what can you avoid? Well, I think you can make it work better if you have a plan. And if you, watching this, because you're young is in the name of what we're talking about today. If you are young watching this, ask your family members, ask the people that you care about or that you might be in charge of or have to care for in the future. Do you have a plan? It's not just having the documents. It's having a plan to go along with all that stuff. And if they don't, get them to somebody who can help them plan. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that you can do. And then when they start declining, putting stuff in place to protect them. That's one of the things we do, is make sure that, your credit's frozen, that, people can't access your account. If I've set up a trust for you, you've got more protection from adding somebody getting their name added to an account. Mom's not going to be able to go and just get a big check out of the bank, which is really common. These predators who prey on people because they don't, they can get access to their social security number. We can help limit that stuff by some of the stuff that we do on our planning side.
Awesome. Some great information there, because I think, as I'm sitting here struggling with issues that I've dealt with my parents. So maybe this seminar was the whole reason I was moderating, I guess, today was so I could learn how to deal with my aging parents. And I think I've learned a lot. I always do that. But I want to go to William before we start doing the Q&A, and then go to Beth. And then if Andrew, we can wrap that way, just go to our Q&A. Is one of my favorite things, William, or the 529 accounts. And I think that's one of the things a lot of older folks don't realize, the value of a 529. And my story is, I have a daughter who will graduate from Clemson next Thursday. Yay. I've paid tuition for 15 straight semesters with a wedding between semesters 10 and 11. So we have paid it out of invested in 529s when they first started. And my dad was always buying these savings bonds, the old age of the E-series. And so I took all those and cashed them and convinced them, if they ever wanted to do something really good, if they were giving cash, put it in the 529. Talk a little bit about the benefits of that for us, because it's the best thing going for paying that college tuition.
Yeah, certainly. And before I talk about that, one quick thing I just want to mention is exactly what Lisa said about getting all that stuff planned out. One of the big reasons, and one thing you can always tell your parents, is if you don't have stuff set up and it goes through probate, those accounts get locked and you can't access them for, especially now with COVID, sometimes a month or 2 months. So if you've got bills and mortgages and stuff like that to pay, the child that is the personal rep might have to come out of pocket to pay for those, and then have to try and get reimbursed from the estate through probate, which is not fun. But on the 529s and the UG, so you have the 529s, which is college savings plans. Each state has a different college saving plan, and it's managed differently throughout each state. So each state is different, but so South Carolina is managed through Columbia Threadneedle, and if you're a resident of South Carolina, then you get the state tax deduction and the federal tax deduction on the money that you give, and inside of that those funds grow tax deferred. So if you put $1,000 in for the first birthday, and that money grows to $20,000 by the time they're 18. You don't have to pay taxes on any of the $19,000 in growth, which if it's just in a savings bond and it grows, then you have to pay capital gains taxes and all of that fun stuff. And you don't need multiple 529s. If you have a beneficiary for, say, Patrick, for your daughter, is your entire family could give to that one 529. You don't have each grandparent and each uncle or aunt doesn't have to have their own 529 for the child. The child can just have one, and then they can also be switched off to I think it's one level up on the family. So Patrick, if your daughters had a 529 and didn't use all of it, you could actually give it to one of their cousins, and they could actually use the 529. So it is transferable as well.
Yeah, we've actually used them all and more. And it's like, how much more do I need to put in it? When I wrote that last rent check in the first of this month, that was a happy smile on mine. That was a happy dance going on. Trust me on that one. But yeah, it's when you understand, a lot of times grandparents want to give kids money for birthdays and events and things like that. And for, a 10-year-old understanding, they get a check from grandma for $50 and they're going to, I'd really rather go buy a video game or whatever. But when you put it in there and start explaining the benefits, my daughter actually is a finance major. So I've learned a lot of things. A liberal arts major has been indoctrinated with a lot of finance this last couple of years. So it's kind of been entertaining and it's been fun, but it's just a great product and one of those things. So I want to go to Beth also too, talking about philanthropy. How do you demonstrate with our parents that how do we love and cherish them? And I think that's, a lasting gift when you talk about philanthropy and how, whether it's a church or a foundation.
Well, I kind of look at this time of year as and kind of to touch on some things that Lisa and Elaine both have talked about earlier. This is a time of year we really do get together as families. We end up having those conversations that maybe we don't really have at other points of the year. We maybe are noticing things about our parents, that I may have a conversation with my sister about, and changes that are happening either with them, with their health. My dad is going in for a heart cath tomorrow. So I can relate to this moving into a new phase of my relationship with them and to how things feel different now when I sit down at the table with my family. And we're having these conversations that are more serious in nature, I think. Having that conversation with my dad, we need to sit down. I need to understand what your plan is. Where is everything? What is my involvement? What can my mom expect in the years ahead? And we're having those talks, and it's hard to do, but I can't stress how important it is. And sometimes we have to take the initiative. We have to say, it's time. Let's have a heart to heart. Let's plan this. Let's be intentional about it. Who needs to be sitting at the table? Who needs to be part of that conversation? Sometimes it's just easier to put it off and not want to talk about the elephant in the room. But if you do have those healthy, meaningful conversations, you can get a lot accomplished and avoid a lot of hurt and unnecessary complication later. And encouraging, if your parents haven't done that planning, to go and take those first steps and make sure their plans are constructed and put together, and that they get to take full advantage of all those opportunities, and that everything's going to be realized in the way that they hope and they would want it to. It's important that they're coordinating those different players at the table. So they need to have Lisa at the table. They need to have William at the table. Their accountant needs to be at their table. Their philanthropist connection needs to be at the table. Everyone that's part of that greater plan, to be sure all those pieces are going to work together and they're going to come together in the way they would hope to benefit everyone that they care about. When we look at how to let our parents know that we cherish and we love them, I think about just a memory from my childhood. I was contemplating preparing for today. What was an experience that I think was formative for me to understand why philanthropy is important? When I was a little girl, I can remember going to church with my parents and my mom nudging me to go and pick up one of the little plastic rice bowls that would sit on the table in the church lobby that you take home with you, and you'd put coins into. And I knew, even as a young person, that was meant for to make a gift to help little children that were orphaned, that were hungry, to feed them and ensure that they had food. So that's an activity. I took that bowl home. And then the interesting side of that is that my mom would offer for us to do chores. We could do chores and we could earn, pocket change. And that might mean you're picking up pine cones in the yard, or it was scrubbing baseboards or washing windows or things around the house. But I was earning money to put into that rice bowl. And so I learned early on that connection between my work and the value of my work and it going to do something good. And that was a lesson that my parents taught me very young. And that's part of their values that they wanted to pass on to me. And so when we're having these conversations with our parents about what they want to do, what's important to them, when they pass, that is the single largest financial transaction most of us will ever have control of in our life. So it's really important that reflects their values and the things that were important to them during their life. And giving is an important part of that, not just to family, but giving to the greater good and to help other human beings. And so that's in that little lesson that they set that fire in me as a child is still with me today. And it's an important part of my life. And my husband and I don't have children. We have a lot of nieces. And so I do things to help pass that concept onto them in a way they can understand it. So your parents, instilled that in you. So give that to your children, to your family members, to that next generation, and help show them the way. And so when your parents decide to make legacy gifts and to make those kinds of charitable estate plans, that's another example. So be part of that, support that when they want to do that. Tell your children and your grandchildren about that. Help them understand that example, because that can be so important and instrumental in the values that become integral in a family's life. Another neat way to just demonstrate and show to them that you got it, that you heard the message loud and clear. Think about what organization they care about, and then go make a gift to that organization and make that gift in honor of your parents so that they can see that while they're alive and they can enjoy it. don't wait until they're not here to make that gift in their honor. Make it for them now while they can know that you listened and you heard and that you cared. So just a little, easy thing to do, but something that could mean an awful lot to your mom and dad.
Thanks so much. The conversation, I know we've had, I have twin younger brothers, and one's in Charleston, one's in Atlanta. And so we always referred to our parents as your parents did this and your parents, and we have that conversation. And I think it kind of takes some of the table talk conversation off of the seriousness of the matter. It's like, no, your parents did this today. And it's kind of like you were disgusted. It's more of that relief of like, how do you deal with two 81-year-old independents who still want to do the things they do and, not tell you the whole story. And you kind of go, okay, we got to figure out what's going on here. So I just want to, before we wrap up, I know if we have folks have questions on the line, and Lisa and William, Andrew, Elizabeth, any just final comments? Lisa, number one thing that folks should take away from this, maybe?
For me, it's planning and making sure that you have everything in order. And I think it kind of echoes what everyone said today. Is just make sure you have a plan. And even if your parents are unwilling, just keep working on it. We always say a lot of times people need to hear it 9 times before they'll go and do it. So, and if they have some short-term memory loss, it might be more than that. So just keep working on it.
So holding the grandparents hostage, holding the grandchildren hostage is not a thing to do, is what you're saying.
Don't do that.
No, thank you, Lisa, so much. William.
I think the big thing is, this is actually in the next 20 years the biggest transference of wealth in history. So making sure that you have a plan, have it set up, have people who are there, and then have your financial planner or your attorney or your CPA having those plans as well, so that when something does happen and the grief and all of that and the funerals and all of that, you have your team that's there helping you out.
Sure. Beth, anything from your end, anything else?
I would just say, again, the planning piece and taking advantage of the charitable giving options that exist. Our federal government incentivizes that. They know that philanthropies do great work and they do it more efficiently. So it's a great way to preserve that wealth and pass it on to the next generation, and to also accomplish a lot of philanthropic good at the same time. They are not competitive objectives. They actually can mutually support the same goals and have even a greater impact and outcome if they're used together. So go and talk to that advisor, learn about these techniques that can really provide a lot of great benefits for not only for the donor, but their family and for their community.
Thanks much. Andrew?
Yeah, I think my parting words are, if you feel overwhelmed by the situation, or your parents are feeling isolated or alone or overwhelmed, look in the community for places that can help, places like senior resources, local parks and recs commissions that have senior bingo day, ways to keep your parents engaged in the community. And that's just going to give them the support and give you the support as the caregiver to really be able to get through this process, which takes a lot of attention. So keep those out there. And I'm also going to do a shameless plug, because I think Lisa's our next guest on the Senior Network, which is online programming we have that's geared towards the senior audience. So it's a great way to get your parents to hear the advice that we heard today. And that's on the first Thursday of every month. And you can look on our Facebook page, Senior Resources, and register for that. We had Teresa Arnold from AARP on there in the past. So just a great, tremendous thing. It can be accessed from anywhere in the world. Great way to have a neutral third party bring up these things, so then you can reinforce it when you get together at Easter.
Andrew, there is no bad shameless self-promotion plug. Trust me, I'm a master of that, and we appreciate it. So I'm going to go back to our host. I don't know if there are any questions in the next few minutes. If folks have questions, I can't see that on the screen, so I don't know if the host can help us out with that or not. We're going to open it up for questions, or?
I don't see any questions so far.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any questions, I want to thank our folks, our panel, Lisa Brown and William Vasilevsky. I'm sorry, I knew I was gonna mess up. Velasco, Beth Lingard, and Andrea Boozer for being a part of it. I've enjoyed, and I say, I always learn something when you're involved in something like this, and appreciate everyone putting this together United Way. Thank you very much for inviting us, and appreciate being the conversation host here today.
Thank you so much for presenting. This was so informative, and thank you everybody for joining us.
You really
Y'all have a
enjoyed.
great afternoon.
Thank you,
Oh,
everyone.
thank you.
Take care. Merry Christmas.